watches this.
Oh,
Does she?
Yes. I was like,
That's actually pretty funny. Hey, there we are.
you're gonna have to scoot over, sir.
Well, I'm gonna share this
Okay.
if I can remember how. Okay, share this. Keep your BIC out of jail.
And help them sleep at night. It is a gorgeous day outside. I was like, this is a perfect fair day.
No day, it's a good fair day.
if there were such a thing. then I
Exactly.
would agree with you. Yes.
Yeah.
What?
I had a guy in the office yesterday. He said the greatest one-liner I've ever heard. He said that Myrtle Beach is like the state fair with a beach.
Yeah.
I've never been to Myrtle Beach.
Picture the state fair with a beach.
Hmm.
I would say less animals, but not necessarily the case.
Do you have anybody watching?
We have one eyeball. It might be me. It might be my eyeballs.
Okay.
Not sure.
Well,
There's 3. Now we're good.
I was gonna say sometimes we have people that watch later.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay.
11:59. Do you want to close the door so we don't get background music?
See.
And if anybody's watching, I know there's a delay. Just make sure you tell me that you can hear us. And I'm gonna refresh your
Yeah,
page
yeah.
here. Hey, you should refresh. Oh. You use Safari and I use Chrome. Nobody can hear us yet.
Keep going. Keep going. Keep going.
Keep on swimming, swimming, swimming.
Keep going.
No, that's an old one. Bless your
Nice.
heart.
There we go, right?
You're pretty.
Okay. So
I guess I'll wait till like 12:01 just in case we get 5 people watching, which would be awesome. We're at 4. Wait, mine says we're at 6. We've been live for 22 minutes and 29 seconds. What you bring me?
Nothing.
One of these days you're going to do those chocolate covered strawberries. Why don't you say
Hi,
hello?
Lisa. How are
Why
you,
don't you
Lisa?
start everything?
Oh, hi, everybody. Welcome to another
Thank you, Lisa.
fun event here with Candace and Chris and Chris. This is Keep Your BIC Out of Jail and Help Them Sleep at Night. I'm Chris Mann from Man, McGimmie, and Jordan.
I'm Candace from me.
sorry, I'm late, guys. Wait a minute. I thought this was supposed to be a costume.
You said I should
No.
wear my gingham shirt, so I wore my gingham shirt.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you own any gingham
All right.
shirts. I mean, you had to go to the store special for this, didn't you?
All right. Well, I'm Chris. Good to see you all today. And I would like to say this is not my actual outfit, but I got a furlough just long enough to come out here and
Awesome.
do this today.
I'll make
Work
you
release.
some cookies.
Work release. That's right.
Work release.
That's right.
All right. So today we're talking about how can you help your BIC sleep better at night, because there's a reason I am officially not a BIC or BIC eligible, because the role scares me. I know what people ask in class. I know what people ask in general. And I don't like any of y'all enough to put my license on the line. And I like money. No. Hi, Tom. So.
Little known fact, I'm actually only 29 years old. And these
Right.
big bags over my eyes just
That-
go to the
that-
fact that I am in fact
Oh, I
a
didn't even
BIC
notice.
and have been a BIC for a number of years.
I mean, yes. How long have you been a BIC?
Over the years, probably 10 years for several different firms, and probably 500 or 600 agents total.
Wow. And you ever get BICs that call you, Chris, with
All the time.
questions?
All the time.
So I know I'm going to ask this question. I might forget, but I'm wondering if you could give one piece of advice to a BIC, whether it was a new BIC or an experienced BIC, what would you say? Or if there was one thing that you wish BICs would tell agents, what would it be?
Me first?
Sure, jailbird.
Okay. Be in touch, be available, set ground rules.
Oh, that's a good one. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Okay, be in touch. You have to know where your provincial brokers are. I mean, just clearly, They're out there practicing. I can't be with them every day. There are things that I need from them. I need to see them. That I have to be present in their lives, and that's kind of their job is to make sure that I stay in touch with them. Being available, I am available. They can call me on my message. Oftentimes, if I'm in a class, they know that I can't get there immediately, but we will have a tiered response. If they can't get in touch with me, they know who their hierarchy is of who to contact. And people know that if it reaches a certain level and my license is on the line, that I should be grabbed as quickly as possible. And then set ground rules. There are very, very few real estate emergencies at 11 o'clock at night. Okay. Having said that, it's hard for a new agent coming in to know that because everything feels like an emergency to start with, but they can explain some things. You know, if we're dealing with a issue with a lender, well, the lender's not going to open until 8 or 8:30 in the morning. They're only going to be available till 5 to 6 o'clock at night. So let's ask ourselves the question, and to be honest with you, let's train our clients this way as well. Certain expectations. We have lives. It is our fault that it is real estate agents' fault that people believe that real estate is a 24/7 game. We have made it that way because we haven't set ground rules.
So if I was an agent, I mean, I already know this, but who your BIC is huge.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you got a bad BIC, they're going to lead you down the wrong road.
Yes.
But then that BIC also needs to have some good ground rules, like you said.
It is a scary day when I'm walking down the halls of the office and I see a face in the office holding a contract that I don't recognize. Okay, so the BICs do need to be physically present and vice versa. They need to make sure.
And I'm going to have you answer the question, but
Mhm.
Chris, for you, if I'm a provisional broker, because this is a sore topic for me,
Okay.
how often, how much should I be seeing my BIC when I'm working? What does the commission say about that?
Well, there's not a specific definition other than the fact that I need to, I can't remember the word. Do you remember the word from the rule?
Is it the majority?
It has to do that I have to actually be
working
be
under
working with you.
the
Yes.
majority of your work
Yes.
should be done.
So in other words, I should be somewhere where you can get in touch with me, somewhere that we can meet together. PB should do very, very little work of a brokerage nature at home.
I
Now,
agree.
they should come into the office, they should be supervised, and by all means, please, I need to see your paperwork as soon as possible. Let me tell you a question I got the other day. It was really interesting. A provisional broker, brand new, is writing their first offer, purchase, and contract. Well, you know, in the days of multiple offers, it's very, very difficult for me to see everything before an offer goes out. Now, let me set a caveat. I want to see. When they're writing their first, second, or third offer and their PBs, I want to see it before they actually send it. But what if they're in a hot situation? I have a life outside of that one individual broker. So his question was, well, can I put that offer in without you having seen it? Unfortunately, the market today says sometimes you have to. Sometimes, well, what should you do leading up to that? Were you trained? Did you take a class? Did you take notes in the class? Did you practice with a colleague, another student, or with your broker in charge? Then you should know how to fill out the offer to purchase. And then once you fill it out, as soon as I'm available, could I see it at that point? You know what? And Chris, you can answer this question maybe better than I can. There are very few things in a real estate transaction that we can't fix if we catch them early enough.
That's right.
Yeah, that's what my thinking is. But when I get a file that literally a day or two before closing, unfortunately, if there's a problem, at that time I can't fix it. It's too late.
I guess worst case scenario, they could call you.
That's right.
Okay, that's not even a question. I know that you well enough that if I had if I had a provisional broker who really couldn't reach the BIC, I would much rather have them call you or Ron because it is important. We're
Yes.
protecting our clients.
And I'm happy, like if you can't find your BIC and you have not submitted a contract before, or maybe you only submitted one or two, honestly, I would prefer it if I could get an opportunity to look at it. Because if you're asking me, then there's a pretty good chance I'm going to end up with the contract when it's executed. And I would like to help you present that offer in a way that is professional, is correct. Because there are just things that you don't know in this until you've done it enough. It's just like anything else. You know, the first couple of times you do something, you can hear about it in class all you want. Until you do it, it's not real. And so it's very difficult to make sure that you're filling it out right.
I think if I was a BIC, I would want the people underneath me to know that I have a team.
Right.
I mean, most people who know me know that someplace I'm probably following Chris. So if you couldn't reach me, dear God, please call Chris. And if you can't call Chris, call the other Chris or Ron or whoever it's going to be.
Yeah.
But there's a team because you don't want to get in trouble. I mean, I would much rather you call outside than just do something incredibly wrong.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to ask. But going back to asking, what would be the piece of advice that you would give?
To
BICs.
BICs.
Mhm.
I think the best BICs are the ones that create the atmosphere and the environment of helpfulness and availability. If your PBs, or anybody in your office really, but if your PBs and folks in your office don't necessarily feel comfortable coming to you asking questions because maybe at some point you've given the impression that they're bothering you or anything like that, that I think that you're not doing your office the best service. If you are a PB where people, or if you're a BIC where people just know that they can come to you with anything, even if they've messed something up and they want help to fix it, which is the most important thing, I think. That's the best BIC, is the one that sort of creates that atmosphere and environment.
I know as a teacher, I would much rather people, once my student, always my student. So I'd rather you even call me, not that I want to get involved in your deal or your BIC's business, but I don't want you to go to real estate jail.
Right. Yeah.
So.
And that is an amazing point. It's interesting sometimes when new agents come in, I don't know if it's intimidation or they haven't learned the hierarchy yet, but the broker in charge is there to be available for those type of questions. Now, in a large firm, sometimes we don't have as much time to just talk about the weather, politics, or something like that. But if it's a big type question, that's kind of what we're there for.
And to pay for lunch.
Please pay for us and to pay for lunch, but not for all of my 100 agents. Y'all did not hear that, okay?
All right, so let's talk about some things that I think a BIC, if I was a BIC, I would want, that would really truly scare me. And I think the first thing would be contracts. I mean, I know we've talked about it, but the question I get at least once a month, hey Candace, what had happened is my buyer, we turned in an offer and the seller's agent told me we were under contract. And so I called my buyer and I was like, hey, I got you the house. And then when I went to get the contract from the seller's agent, they're like, well, what happened is we got another offer. I really need everybody to understand when we're actually under contract. And that's not just something we're teaching in class. So I'm gonna let you start, Mr. Jailbird.
Okay. What you said is exactly true. And believe it or not, I deal with this probably once every week or every other week where someone says, and look, it's the pace of our market today. The pace of our market is you got to get offers in. If you're a listing agent, you may be dealing with 4 or 5. The seller says, I'm going to sign this one, but then they get a better one that comes in. Look, in several of these cases, I've seen where sellers, it could be a $5,000 or $10,000 difference. So I'm not going to tell the seller that, well, you said you were under contract, so we're going to hold you to that. The fact of the matter is they're not under contract until they have gone through the elements that make up a contract: offer, acceptance, and communication of acceptance of that. That's pretty standard contract law. Now, having said that, isn't it interesting, Candace, when we're teaching classes, do people's eyes tend to glaze over when we're talking about contracts?
Oh my gosh.
And they say, in classes when they talk about, is this relevant? Holy cow,
Of course
contracts,
it's relevant.
I hope is relevant. Because if you're not writing contracts, then you're not going to have a big business. So this is huge. And also, let me add to that, watch your words. When you tell someone they're under contract, there are certain expectations that start at that point. Technically, you could say something like, well, the seller has verbally accepted your offer, but you're not under contract yet. And that way the expectation is there, so they're not going and telling their family and friends and calling moving companies and things like that.
Set the expectation level.
Yeah.
Like if a listing agent says, hey, the sellers are on board, they just need to get back to their computer, you wait till they get back to their computer.
Yeah.
There is no verbal contract in real estate.
Do you ever get calls, people asking about this?
Well, yeah, I mean, because when you're a buyer's agent and you've gotten that communication, seller said yes, they just need to sign it, we're good to go. And then you have gone and told your buyer, yes, we've got it, we've got the house. And then the listing agent has to make that phone call. Sorry, my folks decided they're gonna take this other offer. Like, everybody hates it. Everybody hates it. But if you don't go and tell your buyer you're under contract, we're good to go, communicate what you've heard and what it means accurately. then you don't have to be like you're in less of a position to be the bad guy in that scenario.
Well, setting expectations. You said
Right,
it
always set
earlier.
the expectations.
We teach it, but now make sure you teach your clients that, hey, we're going to get a response from the seller's agent, but until we actually see that we're under contract, we are not under contract.
Right.
Because it just hurts, like you said, it hurts everybody's feelings. Nobody wants to make that phone call. And as a BIC, I don't want somebody complaining to the commission, well, you told me, well, you lied. Because that's an easy complaint. I mean, that you just go to the ncrec.gov website. There's that red button. You complain. It's kind of like the IRS. I just don't want them in my stuff.
Yeah.
The difference between a misunderstanding and a lie is just the lens through which the person is viewing it. And a client that feels like that you lied to them just because you misunderstood or there was some confusion still ends up going to the commission as that agent lied to me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Great
Anything
points.
else with contracts? I think.
Well, there's tons of stuff with contracts.
I mean, true. But things that would worry me or should worry me if I ever decide to become a BIC.
I mean, so yeah, I mean, there's the beyond just acceptance. Time is of the essence. Let's talk about time is of the essence. We did a midweek real estate class with Chris on that about a month ago.
Not everybody may know what that is.
Okay, so follow me on the Facebooks, Christopher Man, or Chris Man. I'm actually just Chris Man on Facebook. And every other week or so, I do a little post about things that come up a lot in transactions.
It's a good post.
And then the time is of the essence was one we did a couple weeks ago because it is a big deal. And that is, if it says time is of the essence, then that specific time is the deadline. If it's 5 o'clock on, October 22nd, and you send in your termination at 5:10, you have lost your earnest money. Like 5:01. 5:01 is too late. 5 o'clock, time is of the essence.
Can I give you a couple of examples here and
Yes.
get both of you as a teacher, as an attorney on this? Additional earnest money is one of the few times, there's not that many in the contract, but it is additional earnest money is one of the few times of the essence dates. So here's the deal. The additional earnest money is due today. What is today? 23rd?
23rd.
By 5 o'clock.
Mhm.
Okay. At 5 o'clock, at 5:01, technically, I have not received the additional earnest money.
Mm-hmm.
What could the seller do at that point in time?
Ooh, do you want the teacher answer or the attorney answer? Attorney first. No.
The seller could terminate, like straight out. Like they could just communicate that you've not completed the terms of the offer, and they terminate.
Let me ask you a tricky question on this. If they terminate at if the seller terminates at 5:01, would the buyer still owe them the additional earnest money? They would, because it was a matter of the contract at that point.
I think for me, I think it's the seller's agent understanding, and you said it, you have to communicate that with the buyer. It's not just, oh, it happened and now we're not under contract. The seller has the choice to terminate this contract, and they have to do it in writing and say, hey, you've got one banking day. No, actually, no, for additional or not for additional earnest money.
Because the additional earnest money is time is of
Time of the
the essence.
essence, just
Yeah.
flat out.
And that's it's an easy mistake to make, isn't it? Because you get in tune to thinking about DD and initial earnest money. And to add to that, what if I gave you a personal check
Not for
before,
additional.
not for additional
Not
earnest
for
money? So theoretically, at 5:01, what could the seller do?
Terminate. So that is the very first midweek real estate class with Chris was
Oh.
additional earnest money personal check, which you cannot do, and everybody still does it. And that is not a valid form of additional earnest money. And generally, if somebody walks into our office with personal check for additional earnest money, if it is 2 weeks before the date that it's actually due, because people do that all the time, they put their additional earnest money date in there and they still show up 2 weeks before with a check. And generally speaking, if they do that, I accept it because we know it'll clear and it'll actually be in an account before then, and we still then will remind the agent.
Don't do that again.
But if you were doing it on the day of, you are playing a dangerous game where you're giving the seller an out. You're giving the seller an opportunity to let us deposit that, put that in our account so that it's actually accessible, because that's always the challenge when you're trying to get money that you're fighting over, and then terminate because you didn't comply with that portion of the contract.
So really, as a BIC, you just need to know that your agents understand how to handle earnest money.
Yes.
And, this time being of the essence, and did you get signatures for everything? Because it falls back on me as a BIC, whether you're provisional or a full agent. Because it's a problem.
There's someone out there relying on the agent to be a professional about this. And I promise you, the buyers and sellers have not read this now 14-page contract. So it's up to us to help them understand what these provisions mean and the repercussions of their actions for not acting in a timely manner.
Sure.
I will just, as a caveat to this portion that we're talking about with the additional earnest money, personal checks, I've never in thousands and thousands of closings had a seller terminate over this. But you do not, in a contentious transaction, you do not want to give the other party ammunition for anything. And that's what you would be doing. Because if it's contentious, then people are going to be nitpicking every single thing, and they're going to be going through to find anything that they can use. And don't give them something to use.
I did have one come up. It was an additional earnest money question, and we almost went to, it didn't go to litigation because it was a nominal amount of money. It was a couple $1,000. But the seller was threatening by virtue of the fact that, one, they didn't get the money, so they were terminating, and they were still going after the additional earnest money. But to your point, Chris, the reason we do it right every time is because out of the 100, out of the one time out of 100, or one time out of 1,000, that something does go wrong. And it's such a simple fix.
Right.
Such a simple fix.
I always say it doesn't matter until it matters.
That's right.
And it matters a lot.
That's like an appraisal.
Yeah.
Nobody cares about the appraisal until it doesn't appraise.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that would scare me too as a BIC. It's this idea of, hey, are you scheduling what you need to do, including the appraisal, including anything else to do with the due diligence during that due diligence period?
The best line I've heard about the contract, and I may have gotten this from an attorney, is that contracts are for the breakup, not for the marriage. As long as everything's going well, nobody cares what that says. It's when something goes wrong that it becomes an issue. And clearly we can talk about contracts all day.
Okay, so what else? Anything not related to contracts that you think a BIC?
Well, do you want to go back on the list here?
Yeah, well, go ahead. Pick some.
Okay. We'll come back to that if we have time. I want to get Chris involved in a lot of things here while we have access to them. So I want to jump into accuracy of the closing disclosure. How often there are mistakes on the CD?
There are mistakes. I mean, because we can't be perfect as much as we try to. There are going to be things that happen from time to time, whether it's tax prorations or something like that. And that is why I remember, I will not name names, but I remember sitting down with an agent friend of mine he's got a relative who was a closing attorney, so he does not use my office, which I appreciate. I get that. That's fine. And he got a CD while I was sitting there talking to him. He got the CD for his closing from his relative, and he was like, "I'm sure it's fine, whatever." And I was like, "Dude, look at it. Like, you actually have to review it. That's part of the job because your relative is not perfect." And he went through it, and I think he did actually find something wrong. But that's, I think, something that happens a lot, is that you get it from us, and you're just like, I'm sure it's fine. And there might be something that's not right.
You're not perfect?
Listen, I'm sure there are a lot of people that will tell you I'm not. But look at the stuff that's on there. Like, we in our office have systems in place, so if we see a contract that has a home warranty, even if we don't know where or how much necessarily, we will put the max amount and everything on the CD when we set the contract, so that we know if we don't have an invoice for that, we need to find one. So we'll not miss it. But I can't say that all offices do it that way. You have to check that stuff. You have to make sure your seller pay closing costs are on there, particularly if you had an addendum to add that later, because oftentimes you forget to send that to us, where you negotiated for $2,000 in seller pay closing costs during due diligence, and then forgot to send that form in. That is a big one. That happens more often than you think. And you have to make sure that stuff on there, because if your buyer sees it day of closing, then everybody looks bad. If your buyer never notices it and they notice it a week and a half after closing, then we're figuring out how to compensate them.
So as a BIC, Chris, I'm a client. I had a buyer's agent. They forgot, and where's my home warranty? I was supposed to have a home warranty. It was in the contract. I mean, do you say, I know you wouldn't personally, but do you say, well, you need to talk to the attorney because that's their problem, that's their responsibility, it wasn't on the HUD? Or do you tell your agent, like, what is the fix? What's the best fix there if it gets missed?
Yeah. Well, what I do is now doing compliance as well. I'm looking at contracts all day. So I'm looking at contract addenda, agency agreements, and ultimately a closing. So I take these contracts I'm looking at and I match them up to the Alta. And so if I see that we've got a problem here, there was supposed to be a home warranty. It's not showing up here. So now I'm going to call the agent in and say, hey, so where is the home warranty? Now, some people may look at it and shrug and say, big deal, it's a $600 mistake. What if that buyer who thinks he has a home warranty ends up having a $3,800 air conditioner repair, and there has been no, and I don't make this stuff up. This is actually a case that appeared before the commission. A $600 mistake turned into a $6,000 nightmare ultimately.
Okay, so you don't get anything else from this this whole webinar. It is, oh my gosh, send the copies to the attorney, because I would hate for there to be a $3,800 somebody needs to pay, whether it's you or the firm or it's the what's that word I'm looking for? E&O insurance.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just huge. And this is why I'm not a BIC. I'm feeling better about my decision every day.
Yeah.
When folks come to us and say, hey, this home warranty, which again, because our system, we don't have that happen, but it has happened before we install our system to avoid it. Generally speaking, I would, even if it wasn't our fault, again, this is our firm, not other firms. If it wasn't our fault, I would still say, listen, we didn't get that addendum, send that stuff in going forward. I'll pay half of it with you. And the agent and I would split the cost so that the buyer was out nothing. And if it was our mistake, let's not pay for that. Like, I am not going to put that off. Now, we might go back and say to the listing agent, in certain scenarios, your seller is supposed to pay for this, is in the contract, are they still willing to pay for that? And if we get a no, again, we just fix it. We figure it out, we pay for it. But these are things that I don't know that every attorney is going to do it that way.
Let me bring up, I'm going to throw this one at you as a educator. Okay. If you're the listing agent and you look at the settlement statement and you see that your seller has not been charged for home warranty when they're supposed to, is it okay for you to say, cool, I just saved my seller $600? Can you explain why not?
Because there is a contract. My job is to help that seller fulfill their part of the contract, and they agree to pay it. I mean, they owe that money. I don't want it to pop up later. This isn't about, oh, I saved you, let's sneak around and try to save you some money. You owe that money. And then especially scares me is how many agents sign for their sellers in general. They just like, oh, let me just go ahead and sign for that that CD. Well, they still owe that money.
I think anytime you were making a decision over trying to be sneaky, like something's not there, it should be, or that you guys negotiated a particular thing in the verbal negotiation back and forth before you went under contract. And you negotiated for this one particular thing that was going to stay. Like say it was a fixture. There was a TV that was supposed to say everyone negotiated for. But then when you executed the contract, the buyer's agent didn't put it in there. Like anytime you are in that scenario and it is going to be better for you as just an agent, your seller, all parties involved to just be open about that and call and say, hey, we negotiated this for this. I think you missed it. Maybe you want to revise that. Because all you've done by being sneaky is create a fight. You've created a fight. And if you see a home warranty that's missing on your side of the ledger, it is way better for you long-term to just call the attorney and say, or the buyer's agent and say, hey, did you order that home warranty? We're going to pay for it if you order it. Go and order it. And it makes you look good. It makes people want to buy your listings.
So I have a question that neither of you were prepared for, which is, so I'm first-time BIC.
Okay.
And my agent has come to me, I don't care if they're provisional or full, whatever, and said, hey, can I sign for the seller? Before we get the legal answer, I want to get your opinion on, do you feel like, whether it's a buyer's agent or seller's agent, should we be signing for our clients? What are your thoughts? And then we'll go to the legal answer.
Actually, my answer will defer to the legal answer because I know where this is going to go. And Chris probably has something in his packet. I don't know if it's on the seller side, just something as simple as asking them for the power of attorney for the buyer to do that. I'm sorry, for the listing agent to do that. Is that fairly accurate?
Yes. So a buyer's agent should never be signing anything at closing for.
Say that.
But what if my buyer is
please.
going to be out of town?
No.
Okay, so
if you don't mind, say that again, please. The difference between the seller side and the buyer side.
So a buyer's agent should not be signing anything at closing for a buyer. They just should not. And as a matter of fact, I think most lenders, you're an interested party and you do not want to obligate your client on a loan or anything else as the agent for them on their transaction. Most lenders are going to say no. Most lenders, when a buyer says, I don't want to be a closing or can't be a closing, can I have a power of attorney? A lender's not going to let it be the agent. They're just not. And we would not. Like, people ask us a fair amount if they can do it. We just tell you no.
Will you do it for the buyer?
Also will not.
Okay.
They will not. They have to find somebody independent from the transaction, a family member or something like that to do that. For a seller, different things. So as a default part of our seller doc package, we have a listing agent power of attorney that the sellers are granting the listing agent certain ability to sign documents at the end of the transaction. This does not include the deed. This does not include the lien waiver or anything like that. This is just for if it's a cash deal to HUD, if it's a loan, it's the CD and Delta. And that is the authority that they're given. And I don't see any real problem with it as long as a listing agent, you are going through those numbers with your client before you sign it. Just willy-nilly saying, I mean, I sent it over to them, I'm sure they've seen it, signing, I think you're opening yourself up to some issue. But if you send it over to your client and go through the numbers with them and make sure they understand what's happening and sign for them, I don't have any real objections to that. Some agents will still send it over for DocuSign, make their sellers DocuSign it, and then they'll ink sign the closing disclosure. Either's fine. I don't see a big problem with it, but there are some agencies that won't allow it.
Just being honest, how often, in your opinion, from what you see, do you see agents just kind of going, that's
I don't know what communication a listing agent has with their sellers. I don't know. Like, I'm not sort of privy to that. I'm sure that there are some agents, and you can sometimes just tell by transaction and how it's gone, that perhaps their seller's not fully informed. But I don't actually know in that scenario what communication they've had.
Thank you. I just wondered, just a little thought.
On that same note, home warranty is an easy one to talk about. Seller paid closing costs is another one that I see often in the contract or an agreement to amend that doesn't necessarily match the closing documents. And so that's a concern that I have as well, one from a fiduciary standpoint and one from just a material standpoint, especially if it's an agreement to amend. Did the closing attorney get it so that they knew to do that?
All right.
And again, as an educator, what would you say the agents are responsible for? I mean, they're not responsible for knowing what an aggregate adjustment is, but what are they responsible for?
I think just the accuracy as far as, is everything there? So if I'm, especially since, and I know this is getting really teachery, you're a provisional broker or you're an agent who hasn't done a lot of deals, then you're not really familiar with that CD. And as much as I want to say you learned it in pre-licensing, I was a BIC would want to make sure, hey, agent, do you know what this looks like? Like, can you show me where the purchase price is? Can you show me where the survey is? Like, where are these items that we're supposed to be paid for?
Yeah.
Because that falls, again, once back on the BIC. If there's a complaint. And do you know the CD well enough to look at it and find what's going on? I mean, the CD and the Alta, although they have a lot of the same numbers, are not the same thing. And can you look at them and know and what you're looking at? Yeah,
and if it appears in that contract, an agent clearly should be able to vet that. Okay.
Anything else that would scare?
Now, on other topics here, and again, in deference to time and the fact that we have Chris now, I'm going to jump into surveys. Okay. Now, I don't have a lot to say on surveys, but I would like for you to kind of lead us on that and tell us how often do you run into a problem with surveys?
So to the extent people order surveys, and I think surveys are now, I would say that early on, like maybe 5-6 years ago, surveys were not as commonly ordered for whatever reason. And in the last 3-4 years, I've sort of instilled in people the importance of those things. And we're seeing surveys ordered more and more.
Good.
And I would say on average, at least 25% of surveys have some sort of encroachment, which is a shockingly high number to say out loud. But
repeat that.
25% of surveys will have some sort of encroachment. Generally speaking, offense.
Wow.
Fence companies are not real good at putting them in the right place, and I don't think that.
No offense, but it's
No
true.
offense, fence companies. But there's almost nothing on a survey that we can't fix if we know about it.
Mhm.
If you get the survey, we can fix some sort of fence encroachment. But and even if you don't get a survey, not that I'm ever encouraging anybody not to, most encroachments are so small and little that when they get discovered later, we can fix them.
Mhm.
But without a survey, the big problems won't get caught, and the big problems are huge.
Give me an example of the big problem.
So I'll give you two. One is a smaller big problem. It's a big problem, but it's small. It was a house in Cary where the fence was actually, it followed the wrong neighborhood lot lines, and it actually fenced in about a third of an acre of the property behind them.
Okay.
Like there was, I can know exactly what happened by looking at the way the lot lines in the neighborhood worked, and it was a full third of an acre that did not belong to this homeowner that was fenced in.
Wow.
And if you are a buyer thinking that you were buying what was fenced in,
Mhm.
you were going to be very disappointed.
Mhm.
And they got a survey, and we just had to have that conversation with everybody. Like, you cannot think that what's fenced in is yours. And the sellers ended up moving the fence in, and the buyers were okay with it, but it was very deceiving without that survey. It was very, very deceiving. And then there was a house also in Cary. This was in the news for a while, where there was about 1.5 feet of the actual physical structure of the house on the neighbor's lot. The builder just made a mistake, and once it was discovered that people had already bought the house, they discovered it later. They had at that point already made an enemy out of their neighbor at some point while living in the house. And so when they went to the neighbor to say, "Can we fix this?" the neighbor was like, "No, absolutely not." And these people couldn't sell their house. They actually had to own the house for, I think, 3 years longer than they intended, because they couldn't sell it, and the neighbors refused to work with them. And they had to wait until after the neighbors sold their house.
Oh, okay.
And then the new people that moved in next door already knew about it, from what I understand. I think they already knew about the situation. And as soon as they bought the house and moved in, they came over to that house and said, "Hey, we're the new neighbors.
Gotcha.
Whatever we can do to help you fix it, we will." But they had to wait a long time to fix that, because that was a big issue. And surveys are really there for the big issues. Small issues we can fix really easily. It's the big ones that really matter.
Yeah, not to go too deep in this, but there's the issue of the marketability of the title as well, which is a complete different one. But I mean, it just goes to the point of, this is what attorneys are for. Okay. We catch it earlier. Now, I do want to ask you this as a teacher. Okay. And I didn't set you up for this. So if you need help for me to see where I'm going, when would be the logical time to order a survey? Are there times where it might be important to order the survey during the due diligence period as opposed to afterwards?
I mean, as a teacher, I guess I won't even say this as a teacher. General good common sense would tell me just order it. Just go ahead and order it. Because even though the contract says, hey, the seller's got to give you good title, you need time to fix it if there's a mistake. And just because there's not a mistake doesn't mean there couldn't be something on there that you don't like, like some type of easement, or you don't like who you back up to. Like this, the due diligence is to answer questions about the property.
Okay.
And if you find out something you don't like in the survey, not necessarily just, oh, there's something wrong, but something you don't like about that survey, you need to have that ability to walk away. So I'm not quite sure why you would wait unless you're trying to save money, but I'm kind of like, well, you're trying to buy a house that's worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. I'm gonna need you to go ahead and pay for that survey.
I should have asked it a different way. Are there some things that would survive due diligence and some things that would not? So let me set you
So I
up.
guess yes, and the
You see where
fact
I'm
that
going?
yes,
Okay,
so
okay.
it doesn't matter if there is a problem, if there is an encroachment, something like that. That's something the seller has to fix, even after due diligence. So it doesn't matter if you do that before the end of due diligence.
Yeah.
But something like an easement, like a sewer easement, or you're trying to put up a fence, or some type of easement, that you accepted. It says right there in that paragraph, you're taking that this house with these easements, with the HOA restrictions and things like that. So if you discover that easement and the survey after due diligence, you're going to be walking away, losing your due diligence money, losing your earnest money.
What if I wanted to put in a swimming pool? What if I wanted to put in a patio?
Yeah.
What if there were impervious surface issues, things like that?
I have a little bit of nuance to encroachment issues survive. Due due diligence, and this is sort of a weird little thing that if the neighbor's fence encroaches on you,
Mhm.
that's a title issue that survives due diligence.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay.
If your fence encroaches on the neighbor,
That's
that
there.
is not a title
Yes.
issue,
Mhm.
because that is not an issue that affects your lot.
Good
It's
point.
an issue that affects your neighbor's lot, and it's a financial issue. It's just a risk issue. You have the risk that at some point your neighbor is going to say, "Come move your fence." That's a financial risk, not a title risk, and it is just a little quirk of the survey where that does not technically survive due diligence. But I don't think necessarily agents would sort of see the nuance, and so everybody just fixes all the survey issues, which is the right thing to do. Which is why I'm like, I don't want people to like listen to this and be like, "Ha ha! Now I don't have to worry about that." You should still fix your survey issues.
Gotcha. It's a really important point. Sometimes I know people will say, "Hey, why are we learning all this in pre-licensing?" So that we can have a conversation and you know what the word encroachment means.
Yeah.
The title problems, do exist. So,
And the final question I have for Chris, and he may feel like he's already touched this, is there anything we as agents can do better to work with attorneys on surveys? What role do we play in there?
Tell your buyer client to decide whether they want the survey now, like right now.
Yeah.
Don't wait, because that is the biggest thing I think that we always struggle with is that folks that can't decide, they don't know what they want, and then literally either the day before due diligence they want a survey and they want it back before due diligence survey. Well, that's not going to happen. Or the people that'll decide like literally the week of closing, 3 days before closing, oh, we wanted the survey. We can order one. You're not going to get it before closing. I mean, you might if we call in favors. We only have so many of those before surveyors get mad at us. So like it's actually honestly, I think if you're going to put in an offer on a house, it's perhaps a question to be asking them. Like, okay, if this gets accepted or we don't want a survey, because the sooner we can order it, the better for everyone. If it's normal traditional lot in a subdivision, it's going to cost $500 give or take, maybe a little less, maybe a little more, and just say, is that something you're willing to spend on this with this house? And order it immediately.
I mean, it kind of feels like a disclosure, and I know that was something we were going to talk about, but as a BIC, how do I know, or even as an agent, how do I get this list of what I should be disclosing to my clients? Do you get what I'm saying? Like there's all sorts of all these legal rules, but if I'm a BIC, what I'm afraid of is that my agent hasn't done something, and now the client or the public is mad. They put that complaint out there. So if I were to ask like a list, what should be disclosed? Are you disclosing what you're supposed to? Like if I'm a first-time agent, or even if I'm not, where do I get the airport disclosure? Where do I find out about these roads? Are they publicly or privately maintained? What about Sharon Harris? It still kills me how many times, more than I can count on one hand, when people are like, "Oh yeah, I sold a house in Holly Springs. What's Sharon Harris?"
Yeah.
Or that's a problem. So I don't even know what the answer is there, or what I'm asking exactly.
Ever evolving buyer and seller checklist. Okay, and again, the agents knowing who to talk to, BIC, and then who their tier of people that they trust, their mentors, their trainers, and things like that. And then provision 4 of the offer to purchase actually goes into our long list of buyer's due diligence. So I hate to bring it back to the contract, but I'm a contract geek. If we will read that contract, it actually will educate us on some of the things that we should be doing.
I mean, if only an attorney were to put together a list of disclosures and forms that somebody could use. Yeah, that would be great.
Put it in the notes. We're gonna add that.
And one more thing to add to the list there, right?
Any thoughts on that? For disclosures? Anything that you see that pops up besides just survey and like disclosures wise that you're like, hello?
Well, no, I mean, I think everything that Chris says is right. Like, you just have to ask. Like, it's so hard, especially with disclosures, because you just don't know what you don't know. And if you are choosing to go outside of, as a PB, everything is outside of your normal range of homes. Like everything is new. But if you are a triangle realtor that's been working in Raleigh for 10 years, and you're like, I'm gonna go sell that house in Mebane, you don't know everything that there is. Like that's why there are agents there to do that all the time. So if you're going to do that, and that's fine, I understand it, you have to ask questions. You cannot assume that the way that you do things in Wake County is the way that they do things in Alamance County. or that the disclosures you need here are the disclosures you need there. It's just going to be different, and you have to be willing to ask questions, and you have to be willing to admit you don't know things, which is very difficult for a lot of people.
So if I'm a BIC, I guess I'm just thinking, like, if I'm an agent and I'm trying to choose a BIC, I really need to make sure that I have a BIC who's either really knowledgeable or is giving me that team of experts. Because if you only sell, in Wake Forest, and now I'm trying to sell a house in Mebane, I can ask you, but what are the chances that you know? Or that means I need to have an attorney who's got that information for me. Pick up the phone and say, hey, I don't sell a lot in Mebane. Chris, what should I know? Is there anything I'm missing disclosure-wise?
Well, yeah, I don't want to put the burden on Chris. He doesn't know the whole state either. He sees a lot of it at the closing, and don't forget the power of a referral. Rather than me drive from Holly Springs to Hillsborough or Mebane to sell a house, maybe the thing to do is to call an agent who does know what it is there. Take my safe check. I call it mailbox money when I talk about referrals. If you're going to do it, you better go there and you better know what they are. And so this is the expectation that the commission has for us, is that we are going to know if we agree. The Realtor Association does as well. This is not just a rule thing. This is a code of ethics issue.
Yeah, or share the deal or something like that. Like, don't be afraid to walk away from the deal because you don't know the area. And I know agents find that hard to hear sometimes.
Yeah.
But
good point.
Why? Anything else we should be
of the next topic?
Yes.
I'm going to run through this one fairly quickly. You guys add whatever you'd like to. But the class was what keeps me awake at night. Mistakes on square footage and septic tanks. These things, and it boggles my mind as to why, because they're the easiest things in the world to fix. If you disclose that something in the MLS is 3,800 square feet, I want to see the evidence that it has been measured by either you in a good faith measurement or by a professional, such as an appraiser, that has measured it and vetted that number. That if there is a 5% variance that the commission recognizes could happen by intelligent adults measuring a complicated house, but you should not rely on that 5% measurement. If you're measuring a modular or a double wide that's 28 by 48, you should have a pretty exact measurement on that. So get these houses measured, do it yourself if you're capable of doing it. Hire someone to do it, and then once you get that number, make sure that number is the one that you put in the MLS, and they are very, very close together. And Candace, what are your thoughts about just taking the number on the tax records and putting it
Are you trying to hurt my feelings?
Yes.
You should never take the tax record numbers. Just don't trust the tax man. Don't do it. Call an appraiser and they'll do it. They'll measure for you. It's usually about $100 or so, and you can get those measurements and put that information in your file.
Yep.
If I were a BIC, I would have this extensive checklist that's like, look, for my protection, I need to know that you went out or you had somebody physically measure that house. I need to know where you physically went to the FEMA maps and you saw them. You didn't just go, oh, hey, seller, are you in a flood zone? Like, all of those things you need to have in your file so that we can prove you actually did your homework and looking so that you know what you need to tell people.
Yeah, and I've been in situations before where we have negotiated a settlement on square footage because of a mistake our agents made. At one time, 28,000, other 58,000. 58,000 because of a square footage mistake. Dual agency involved as well. Many of my students have heard me tell that story before, which brings up another thought. When you go to CE classes, please listen, especially in the general update, because this is the commission telling you things that are problematic. And how often recently have you seen square footage, septic issues?
What were the 4 S's? Septic, square footage,
underground storage tanks, and subdivision, street disclosures. If the commission's telling you they're important, then don't miss it. There's an easy way of resolving that.
So that checklist idea becomes really important.
Yep.
And maybe if I'm an agent and you're watching this, I don't care if you're here in North Carolina or not, create a checklist and then have your BIC or your broker take a look at it. If you have a trusted attorney, have them take a look at it. An agent that does business a lot, have them look at it, because there's so much potential liability in this business.
Sure.
And I think that is exactly why I'm not a BIC.
Yeah.
Because I know there's a lot I don't know.
And oftentimes, as I was saying earlier, I'm seeing it after the fact.
Mhm.
So if I see it immediately and you just fess up and say, hey, look, I put it in my list, it was incorrect, let's fix it now.
Right.
Then we can. But if it comes up to closing, or I want to pose a question for you, Chris, and I know you weren't prepared for this, so I don't know off the top of your head. I get a call a lot as a BIC or just someone who's been in the business a lot after closing,
Right.
where someone calls and says, hey, here's what happened. Do you think I should call an attorney? Do you have any thoughts on what the most common cases where you get called after closing?
Yeah, so those things, almost always when we get called after closing, it is because of some catastrophic structural problem in the house.
Mhm.
Like if somebody's really like mad, like they moved in and then they found out that they have to buy an $8,000 AC unit, or like there's some dramatic thing where it's going to be tens of thousands of dollars. That happens all the time, and that is, this is sort of thing where I don't know that agents can always fix that.
Mhm.
Like you don't know, and those are just, that's just a part of real estate.
Mhm.
There have been some things that have come up where it's they feel like the MLS was wrong and they moved into the house.
Mhm.
Square footage was off and they found out after closing. Those things come up, and again, we refer people to competent litigation attorneys, because that is not me. I don't sue people.
Yeah, and by the way, I wasn't trying to lead you to square footage on that. I apologize for that. Your first answer was where I thought that you would go with it. Material issues that may or may not have come up, which technically segues into our final topic, which has to do with repair negotiations. What keeps me asleep at night, I awake at night, are repair negotiations, because we tell agents to not draft language for the contracts. And then when it's time to negotiate repairs, we give them a due diligence repair request that has a great big blank spot in the middle. Do you want to run with that one a minute, or?
I mean, what hurts my feelings is when I see people take that repair request and they say C items 24D 17, L, whatever it is. They just put the item that the home inspector said needed to be repaired or looked at and says, do this. And I don't know what that means. I mean, I learned that pretty early on, is handing that to the seller and saying, fix this, is not a repair request. It's just saying something's wrong. There needs to be some, what's the word I'm looking for? Three of us, so we can't say it.
That's it.
We
Is
need
it
to be
lunchtime yet?
specific about what you're looking to have done.
Yeah.
And then making sure that you actually find out it's been done, whether it's receipts, whether it's a home inspection, like a home reinspection. I don't know why this isn't a thing that everybody expects to do, because then your buyer moves in and then they figure out it's not fixed, and then they call you and they're like, why? Sorry, you just hit a hot topic for me.
Notice what my notes were. So this is clearly not something that we made up. Clearly defined and then confirmed. You can't confirm unless you clearly define them to start with. And by the way, if you reference the inspection report, then in compliance, I need to have the inspection report so that I know what we're talking about. I think Chris has a little bit of a different twist on repair negotiations.
Well, I do, because I say this all the time, but I will say that the clearly defined is a huge one. Like the number of times I see a repair request and it's like, look into the problem with the AC. Look into the problem is not a fix. Like that's just saying, yep, definitely broke. I looked into it. You're right, it's broke. And they've complied with the due diligence repair request at that point, because it didn't say fix anything. I have often said negotiate for money. Like that's always my thing, negotiate for money, because if you negotiate for money, you don't have to go back and confirm that the repairs were made. Were they done by a licensed contractor like you asked? Like you don't have to do any of that stuff. But I've softened on it slightly, because there are scenarios, I think, where the scope of the repair isn't going to be clear. And saying negotiate for money doesn't work when you don't know if the AC just needs a $500 fix or a whole new AC. So that's fair. Like you have to do these things where you have to say AC doesn't work, it needs to be working condition, who has to be the one to fix it, that sort of stuff. And I get that stuff. But generally speaking, if it's just fix the the siding or that sort of stuff where it's very clearly defined, just get money. Do it later. Like let the buyer pick who they want.
Now, Mr. Attorney, can't you just hold on to a really large sum of money until after the repair is done?
No. Yes, but no. Yes, but no. So in a cash transaction, generally fine. There can be an agreement, an escrow holdback agreement. Some lenders will allow us to do that, where they will say, sure. But generally, lenders don't want that. Lenders do not want to lend money on a house that has outstanding repairs. They just don't. It can happen. We do it, but it's not ideal. And also, I don't personally, as the attorney holding that money, want to serve as an ATM for the next 6 months.
Right.
Because that's generally what happens. Is that I'll get, I'll be holding $5,000 and I will get $450 invoices from now until, February of next year. That's a whole lot of work that I don't want to do, but we do it. But generally, repairs should be done before you close, or you should be getting money. Those are the two things that are ideal in this scenario.
So I'm going to squirrel for a second, just because somebody asked me literally yesterday, and I was like, I'm going to see Chris tomorrow.
Okay.
I'm the agent.
Mm-hmm.
I have a buyer. My buyer says they want to have a pest inspection. It's not that expensive, but whatever. A pest inspection. I pick up the phone. I call. I order it. You don't buy the house now, buyer. And the pest inspector is saying, you know what? The buyer hasn't paid me. You're the one that made the phone call. You need to pay me. Just out of curiosity, I was like, I don't know. Thoughts?
You pay the pest inspection. I mean, really, that's the answer. Like, he's not going to sue. You're not going to be sued for $75 for a pest inspection as an agent. They're not going to do that. But this is a vendor that you presumably like and you work with a lot. They do a good job for you. Just it's a cost of doing business. But often in that scenario, if it's somebody that you like, you've been working with for a lot, you can go back to that pest inspector and say, listen, they bailed, they won't pay. You want to split it with me? And somebody that you can work with a lot might do that. You can save yourself $40 by negotiating with them on that stuff. But they're not going to file a lien, generally speaking, on the house for $75. It's not worth it. But you could see a scenario where you paid somebody or you hired somebody for $900 for structural inspection, where you do end up putting a lot more at stake with the current home, because that's where they went and did the work. Now, they don't have a contract with the seller, so they technically can't do that, but that doesn't mean you're not going to create some drama.
Interesting, years ago, back during the meltdown, was 2008, 2009, coming out of that, I had a pest inspector in class. And how much is a pest inspection? $75 to $125, something like that. And he was telling me at the time that he had no choice to go back to the agents who had ordered these, because he was holding $5,000 in receivables at that point in time. So, think about that, was right around the time of the new contracts came out. We probably had a 50% fallout rate under the new due diligence contracts. And so he was getting stuck. $5,000 is a lot of.
And it comes up with surveys a lot.
Yeah.
Because people will order the survey before due diligence is up, then they terminate, and then they don't want to pay their survey because they're like, and so we do have to go back and.
If only there was a form that you could fill out with your client that says, hey, if work gets done, you agree to pay for it.
In these scenarios, people know, I think, but if people terminate and they're just going to be that person signing that form doesn't mean anything.
I think I'll create one. I'm going to call it the professional services disclosure.
An election form?
An election form.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
I'm thinking
that's a good idea.
I'm thinking about doing that.
All right.
And if that form exists, by chance, having folks sign that at the closing is probably late.
Excellent point.
I only say that because I will often do a closing. We go through the entire loan package, and then the agent will pull that out, say one more thing, and then they go through it.
Do you know why? It's because we demanded in compliance.
Right.
And if they haven't done it before, they get it at the.
They can't get paid.
last second. So
By the way, can you
great
do
point.
this? So
I
there
don't-
was, go ahead.
I was going to say, I don't want to keep these people over an hour. So can you wrap it up? with
Yes,
whatever
I was going to say,
further
we
you're gonna
didn't, the other thing that would scare me is dual agency.
Yes.
But lucky for you all, that is going to be next month's topic, is dual agency. And just agency in general, because we're not doing it right, guys. And some of us are doing a great job, and some of us aren't so.
And all I get to see a lot of times is the paperwork, and if the paperwork's wrong, I have a bad feeling that the leading up to the paperwork was not done correctly.
Yes, and we are agents, and that is a legal thing. We have a legal relationship here with our clients. So before we say goodbye, the last thing I want to say is Chris, out of the generosity and the kindness of his heart, he is going to pay for us to have a round table. So if you watched our last webinar, we said that we'd love to have a round table about iBuyers. And the more I thought about it, I thought it'd be really awesome at the end of this year to kind of do a state of the market and talk about, what happened with the market in 2019, where we think the market's going to go in 2020, and, about iBuying, because that affects the market. So that's going to be happening. I'll have some more details for you, the location, the date, but I want to have about 15 or so people there. So if you're interested in going, like our video, and that'll give you a chance to enter. You like the video, and then if you share the video, I'll even give you a second time to enter, and then the three of us will get together and we'll draw names maybe in about a week or so. So you'll get some more details, but I'm really excited about this because the state of the market and where you need to be preparing for, both legal things and what's the, are the sales going to go up, down, what do I need to look at? I think that's going to be huge. So I think that is it. Anything else big going on?
I got nothing.
You got anything?
Just Halloween, I'm already dressed.
You are already dressed. Ooh, I'm doing a strategic buyer specialist, which is a designation at the beginning of November.
Good one.
So if you've been looking for that, just look on my page and you'll see it.
Does it qualify as a CE credit as well?
It qualifies as a CE credit and you get a designation because I'm special like that. And it's also an amazing class. So I think that's it. I think we get to say bye, and we are exactly on time. Say bye, boys.
Bye, boys.
Bye.